This episode is brought to you by Granicus and the Macro Group. Welcome back to another episode of Black Tech Talents Podcast, BTT Discussions. Today we have a very special guest, Sam Ndely. Sam I've known for years. I met Sam in, I think, 2017 at like one of my first ever tech events. And we've been cool ever since. We've worked together in multiple capacities, and we'll talk about that more as we get into the episode. But very excited to have him. Sam, welcome to the show.
Hey man, thanks Mike for having me, and it's an honor to be on the show. I love what you've been doing so far and the conversations you've been having with people in the community talking about tech in our community and our culture, and keep pushing things forward, man.
For sure. I appreciate that. So, you've taken on a very special role recently in 2020. So why don't you let people know a little bit about where you are today, your position, and kind of what that means, and then we'll jump into your journey.
Yeah, man. So 2020 has been such an interesting year for everybody. It's been a lot of heartache, right? But on top of that, some people have been able to receive a lot of blessings, and so have I. And I had the opportunity to actually transition jobs this year at a really interesting time. It didn't come without any struggle. And I'll tell the story, if you don't mind, of how I actually
Yeah.
transitioned jobs. But so for the last 3.5 years, I was working at MEDA, Metropolitan Economic Development Association, as a business consultant. And we actually worked together there. You were one of my clients, and you got to see your company grow from, if it was premium or any other venture that you had put on. We'd always chop it up and talk about the directions and places you can take your creation. So that was always a fun journey. That was one of the most rewarding things, was just the friendships that were built out of those relationships that I got as being a consultant with a lot of my clients. So I'm gonna forever miss that job, and it taught me a lot. But I actually got the opportunity to apply for a position at the Center for Economic Inclusion, and I ended up getting the job. But the time that I was leaving my previous job and I was getting ready to leave. It was actually the day that George Floyd got his murder got publicized, right?
Yeah.
And so that's when everything started going crazy. So I was actually transitioning jobs during that time. And so, being a business consultant at MEDA, we were working with a lot of minority businesses that were targeted during the uprisings by the white supremacists and counter protesters to the resistance of the police brutality, right? And so we had businesses that were affected by that too. And so I'm trying to, aid in that as I'm transitioning into a new role. And in my new role at the Center for Economic Inclusion, I'm the director of employer inclusivity. So my role is to work with private sector corporations to help implement racially equitable best practices within the organization. And during the time of the uprisings, the Center for Economic Inclusion was working with a number of Fortune 500 companies that were locally here, trying to figure out ways that they could support the community more than just putting out a statement, but more behind the scenes stuff. So to leave the job that I had and to go into the job that I'm currently in right now, it was a lot, and it meant a lot, and a lot of pressure on top of that. But I welcome that pressure, right? And it's been a great experience so far. I can't believe it's already been 6 months since I joined the team, but we've even from when I joined, our team has grown from 9. I think we were at like 8 when I joined, to like now we're at 14. So we've hired a number of people, and we just completed our 3-day virtual summit this past week, and it was amazing. We had a great experience doing that. It was the first time we've ever done a virtual summit. And the funny story is, I was actually supposed to be a speaker at the summit before I got hired on the team. So I still ended up being able to moderate one of the final panels with two really great senior vice presidents at CentraCare and also at Ecolab. So, and then alongside with my CEO, Tawana Black. So it was really a great experience. I was honored to be able to moderate and to be able to participate at that capacity. And I look forward to a lot of the events that we have planned for 2021. So keep a lookout for what we got going on.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's awesome. And so with this show, we focus and highlight, different Black people that are in tech, and we have a lot of conversations about diversity and inclusion. And you're kind of in the mixture of both. So, in your early days, what got you interested in kind of tech, entrepreneurship, diversity and inclusion that brought you to this journey to get where you're at today? Because you put in a lot of work networking, being at different events and just making your presence known, which is why you've gotten a lot of these opportunities you've gotten and met so many different people and have so much respect in this ecosystem. And that's something that I want our listeners and the people who are aspiring to be in this industry to understand is to network. So even when I'm talking about entrepreneurship, when I'm talking about entertainment, when I'm talking about tech, networking is one of the constant variables in all of that, and just making sure you're consistent and respectable. So kind of go back to the beginning of your journey into this, and let people know how your interest like evolved and some of the key people you've met that kind of helped shape that.
Yeah, I would love to. So looking back, I guess my journey in tech, I mean, I've always been somebody that's been fascinated by tech and technology. You know, I've been a big Apple person my whole life, right? And just trying and understanding how these devices can like really impact people's lives and make schools a lot easier to teach students and businesses work more efficiently. I've always been fascinated by that. And so 2012, I had the opportunity to just start working part-time at Apple. Hal Reynolds was the guy that hired me. He was the only black um, store leader in the market for Apple, and one of the few black store leaders in the entire company. And he was running one of the highest grossing stores. And he was a huge impact to me and providing opportunity for me as I grew in that organization. Starting as just a part timer to going full time to joining the business team to working with specifically business customers. And then I ended up switching stores because they had an opening for a full time business expert there at the Uptown store. And he was like, "Yeah, go over there. One of my best friends runs that store. You're gonna grow and flourish there." So I left and I went to Uptown, and that's when I started really working with more business customers, because we're close to downtown. And it was really, really a great experience, man. Like it really taught me a lot about Apple's a great organization, a great company. They really take care of their people. And it taught me a lot about just raising my business acumen, understanding how so really understanding customer service and really like what the customer journey is and putting the customer first as far as how their experience is with your brand and what it's like for them to actually not only like just learn about a product, but when they purchase a product and what happens after that, they really, really take that seriously. And it doesn't always seem like they do, right? When you go into a busy store and you may not be able to get, exactly what you want, but you have to also understand humans are humans and people make mistakes, but the intent behind the experience is there, right? And so I learned a lot about that. And during my time at Apple, I met a lot of people in the startup ecosystem in that space because a lot of our clients were startup companies, right? And so Uptown was the favorite store. Rest in peace to Uptown. They just closed that store down.
Yeah, saw that.
Yeah, so that was hard to really see, and I live right by there, so that's going to be a real miss for the Uptown neighborhood. And but during that time back in like 2014, 2015, I'm working with a lot of startups and really like small startup companies, but like they're growing really fast, seeing a lot of growth. They want to grow with Apple. We're providing solutions to them, and I'm just networking and meeting people, understanding like how these businesses are growing and like the startup world was really, really fascinating to me, right? So as I'm meeting people and I'm talking to different people here and there at the store and whatnot, um, I'm realizing that there's not a lot of black people that are starting these startup companies, right? And then when I did meet black people who were interested in buying a computer, and like I would ask them, "What are you going to use your computer for?" It's like, "Yeah, I want to start learning how to develop apps and have some really cool ideas for X, Y, and Z." I'm like, "Oh, well, have you ever thought about working at a startup? Like we got a bunch of customers that are, I'm sure they're hiring people left to right. Have you ever, thought into doing that?" It's like, "Nah, not really. Like I'm trying to start my own thing," or "I didn't know anything about it." And I'm like, "Well, why don't any of the black people or people of color know about these opportunities that are here, right?" And then you start realizing that when you look at companies, when they're starting, a lot of times people hire people they know in their network, right? And if you're not in somebody's network, it's going to be hard to really get in the very beginning, because it's all about that trust piece, right? Which is totally understandable. But when companies grow and they scale, they continue to hire, when they continue to hire people that just look like them, that's when it becomes problematic, because that's when you create a very monolithic culture, right? So I'm looking and I'm like, okay, well, there's not really, and then there's a bunch of events that I start seeing popping up on Meetup, on the Meetup app and Eventbrite and things like that, and Facebook. And I'm like, okay, well, there's all these tech events that, you know, people are going to. And I went to a couple of them, and like everybody else I would talk to that was a person of color or Black that would go to these events, they would just say like, yeah, I was like one of the only few that were there. There were never any events that were specifically for Black people or people of color in the city at that time. Um, so 2015 comes around, and um, we host at the store, that Uptown store. We host the first Blacks in Tech meeting, and that was a really cool experience because we had a brief room upstairs, one of the first brief rooms in all of Apple, and that's where we had the meeting at. And that's where I actually met Alex Rodriguez, who's not Black, he's Mexican, but he was there supporting and just trying to meet and network with people, because he was in the startup world himself as a young cat, like barely, pretty much in and out of college at that time in his life, and was trying to figure out what he wanted to do, but he knew he was really good at working in small companies and growing them. So he was just trying to network, and we connected, and I started looking him up and seeing the things that he was a part of, and he was killing it. He was doing his thing. So we had a meeting, and we were just talking about some of the gaps we saw in the ecosystem. And next thing we know, we're co-founding Gravity in 2016. And Gravity was an organization that we focused on trying to help people of color break into the tech startup space, because we saw the opportunity and the need for it. Alex knew a lot of really talented tech founders of color, and I knew a lot of people who just wanted to get into that space as a developer or whatever it may be, or even just learn how to start a business themselves. And I've worked with people to help them start businesses from the technology side at Apple for a couple of years. So, I was just like trying to, lend my expertise in that way. And then I'm a natural networker, so I knew a lot of people who would just come to the events because we were talking about really dope things. And so we started doing events, just meetups, and then we started doing fireside chats with founders, Black founders, Latino founders as well. And then we had a summit in 2017, and we had about 50 people. It was on a Thursday, and it was an all-day summit, and it was a dope experience. And we brought a VC from California, Arlen Hamilton. She's a Black woman VC, and she actually ended up investing in one of our attendees, Anila from Habit Aware. And it just kind of grew after that, right? And we just continue to do more events, partnering with Osborne 370 over in St. Paul, and we were working with Fuel Collective as well too, and hosting our events there. And other small startups would allow us to use their space for event space, and we've had a lot of support from the ecosystem and the community. And so while I was where I was doing Gravity, I was still working at Apple, and then I left Apple, went to MEDA, and then I started meeting more. That's where I actually started like hands-on helping businesses start up and move up and scale, and providing them resources and things like that. While we were at MEDA, while I was at MEDA, we did the $1 Million Challenge. It's the largest pitch competition for minority businesses in the country. And we got I got a couple clients that were able to participate, and some that won the challenge as well too. So that was a really cool experience. And now, with 2020 happening, we kind of peeled back a little bit and slowed things down. There's a lot of change on our team for Gravity, so we haven't really done events this year, but the intent is to start things back up in 2021, because the demand is still there. There still needs to be platforms for founders of color to talk about their experiences, and people want to get that content and learn about how they can start their business and get their their opportunity, right? So that's really where my journey has taken me. And it's been looking back now, it's like it's crazy to think that, it's only been 4 or 5 years, right? But it's been a blessing, man, and I'm really excited to see where things go next.
Definitely, definitely. And you said, a ton of important stuff. One, I think there's still not enough resources and activities and information where, Black technologists and founders, people who want to become founders,
Right.
to kind of congregate, learn, get that information and get that game. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, we met at an event that was geared towards that. And I think there was like 10 of us as far as Black people. And there was like, probably 60, 70 people at that event, the Code Switch event.
Yep.
But I'm glad I went. One of the big things I talk about and advise people on is being in the room when it comes to networking. Like you can't achieve anything if you're not in the room. And sometimes you go in a room to meet somebody, and sometimes you enter the room to be met. And two of the examples I give actually include you. I just thought about that. One of them is the event where we met, and you know me, like I hustle like crazy, and so that weekend I didn't sleep at all. Like I was up I think Thursday to like Monday,
Yeah.
something crazy like that. And so because of that, I was hesitant to come to that event. Brittany, she had hit me up and said, "Hey, you're in tech. You should come to this event. I'm helping organize." And me and her had met through my yacht party. I
Hmm.
hired her through her DJ career, and she came and DJ'd one of my yacht parties. And so she was like, "Hey, come through." And I'm like, "Well, you kind of know what I do. Like, should I come?" And she's like, "Yeah, just check it out." And I'm like, "But is it going to be worth it? This type of thing." And it wasn't that I didn't want to go. It was just like I knew I was going to be crazy, stupid, busy, and I didn't want to go unless it was going to be like a really good opportunity. And so she was just like, "Yeah, I don't know, just you should come check it out. Trying to get more Black people to show up, blah blah blah." So I'm like, so I'm debating on it, and then I'm like, "All right, I'm gonna go." Right. Because mind you, I'm thinking about it, and then it's the next morning. I'm still awake, so it's like I could be like, "Let me just take a quick nap," but instead
Right.
I'm like, "Let me
Not
go,"
show up.
because it started early too, didn't it? I think it started like 8 or 9 or something like
Yeah.
that. So got dressed, came out there, and then the first thing they had people do was like come up and like pitch their idea or idea they wanted to do. So I'm like reading the room, never pitched before, and but I
Yeah.
just got in line and I went up there
You did it. You did the thing too.
yeah, thank you. Mondo was there,
Yep.
and he was standing next to me actually, and that was my first time meeting him as well. But he knew about premium, and so I go up there and I pitch, and I don't remember the whole pitch obviously, but I was just like, as people were pitching, I was reading the room, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be some like government funded like save the world type of thing, so I got to kind of pivot the entertainment thing to make it sounds like it fits. And I just went up and I'm like, Black people only own this percentage of the entertainment industry and blah, 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 and this and that. And through premium, I'm going to empower more Black people to earn money and blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, Jay-Z has title streaming. I have premiums ticketing. Boom. And walked off, right? Mind you, nervous as shit. But I actually got like a round of applause. And then like I didn't get a second to myself after that. Like, people were like, "Bro, I didn't even think of ticketing and like just all these different things." And then you came up and you're like, "Yeah, we're gonna talk." And then like I went and sat by myself, and like 4 people came over, like, "Can we sit with you?" And I was like, "Man," so that was like the first real introduction to like being in that ecosystem and having
Yeah.
that feeling of like people being genuinely interested in what you have going on. And so I ended up staying way longer than I intended on staying too. I wasn't gonna stay that long. I was gonna come check it out, network, and then dip. And I think that day I stayed the whole time. And I met you, I met Clarence, I met Actually, I didn't talk to Clarence till the second day. I met you. I met Anika.
Mm-hmm.
I met
Mondo.
Mondo
Yeah.
and a few other people I met, but we didn't necessarily continue on like we have.
Yeah.
So, so then I'm feeling good. I'm proud. I leave. I handle my other duties I have to do. I think I ended up taking like a 2 hour nap, and then I got up and I went to this home buyers seminar because I wanted to learn the process of buying a house or whatever, right? So then I ended up going to that, and that so that started early too. That was like another 8 a.m., 9 a.m. thing. And on the event page, they had it set up for like it was like 2 or 3 hours. And when I got there, it was an all day thing. It was like 6 hour.
So
Six
it's pretty
hour.
much more of the story is Mike doesn't sleep.
Yeah, not at all. So I get there, I do this home buyers class, and then it's going to be the second day of this event where everybody was supposed to, all the teams were supposed to present and all this type of stuff. Now, mind you, I wasn't on a team. I had no interest in like coming up with a fake idea in 2 days, and like I was focused on premium, right? Ton of money invested, ton of time, but my interest in the event was once again just networking, being in the room, meeting people. And so same thing. So I'm doing the same thing again. I'm hitting Britt. I'm like, yo, how's it looking? Did people come back? Blah, blah, blah. And she's like, yeah, just come through. And I'm debating because I have another thing I got to do. And I said, oh, and then I've already missed half of the event being at this home buyers thing all day. And so I'm like, all right, I'm gonna come through. So I drive out, and I was over south. So I go from over south to St. Paul at that, come to the event. People are pitching, or I think the pitching was done. That's why I was hesitant. The pitching was already done, so I wasn't going to get to see everybody pitching the actual products they created. I got there, they were doing the judging. That's what was going on, and I basically hit text Britt, and I'm like, just do me one favor, just point to whoever's important. I'll go holler at them. So I literally get there, and she points at this woman, and like a movie, the woman was walking away, and she points, and I go to follow her, and the elevator door is closing, and I literally slid in the elevator right before it closed, and I'm like, hey, I'm Mike Jackson, I'm working on this thing called the Premium app, such and such said I should holler at you. So then I walked her to her car. She was looking at me crazy because I literally slid in and the door shut. And then and so I walked her to her car, exchanged information, but then she was like, but who you should really holler at is Clarence. And so I'm like, cool. So then I went up, and then the judging was kind of done and people were talking. And I went to Clarence, and I'm like, yo, I heard you're the guy to talk to. And he was like, nah, not me. And then we could continue talking or whatever. And then I realized that Chris Baum had already introduced us through email, but we were all so busy we never actually got to connect. So then we got to talking or whatever and exchanged information. And I think, of course, I talked with you again, Nika, and then ended up leaving. I had something else to do. So I ended up leaving, doing whatever else I had to do. That went all night. And then the next day, I had to do something as well. So I didn't sleep till like Monday till like probably like 6 p.m. Because then when I was supposed to be done with everything, um, a friend hit me up and was like, I'm stranded. I'm like, are you serious? So I had to go get them before I could go to sleep. But from that event, like I said, we've built a relationship. I became a client at MEDA. I've built, relationships with everybody else that I mentioned in this story, and that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have come. Because I've never seen you anywhere else. Like, we know each other now, so we've intentionally been around each other, but like outside of that, we haven't run in the same circles, right? So
Right.
it's like you and a few other people like Clarence. I've never just randomly seen Clarence somewhere that wasn't intentionally because it was a tech event, or it was because mutual friends brought us together, or because me and him planned on
Well,
linking, right?
it's funny because I bet you in my college days I was at events that you were throwing. I didn't even know who you were.
Right.
So we
Right.
had run into each other, but it was like I didn't know who you were. So we
Yep.
hadn't really met formally. So it's funny how things happen like that. But I mean, I get what your point is, man. Like essentially, like sometimes you don't know what you're missing out on until you actually like try it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And people like, yes, we live in Minnesota. A lot of things, there's not a lot of things that are made for us here, right? But we can create our own circles, our own tables, our own conversations, and we do that. But sometimes when we show up at places, you never know what opportunities may come from if it doesn't intentionally look like it's for you, right? And like,
Mhm.
I think it's all about you went to that event, but I think you had enough confidence in yourself and what you had to offer to make sure that you knew that you're providing value to that room, even if they didn't see it initially. And then when you opened your mouth and talked about what your idea was, that validated what your value was. And then everybody was like, I want to sit next to you. I want to talk to you. You didn't have a moment to yourself the rest of the
Yeah,
event.
it was crazy.
I feel like a lot of times we put ourselves in situations where we don't value our own talents and our own like abilities that we have to offer the world, and we don't put ourselves in spaces where people can see that. Now, obviously, you want to be able to make sure you know how to protect yourself and make sure like you know how to like make sure nobody's taking your intellectual property and things like that. But like we're talented, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like you run a company called Black Tech Talent. Like you gotta let people know how talented we are. And that's exactly what you've been doing with your organization so far. So like, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of and tech is not something that is is for any specific group of people from an
right.
ethnicity standpoint. It's all about innovation and ingenuity, and who's more innovative and has more ingenuity than Black people. Let's be
Yeah,
real.
definitely.
So I think if we have an opportunity, if we continue to do what we're doing in this space, we're going to be able to take it to the next level, just like we've done with a lot of other industries. And that's what excites me about the work you're doing, the work we did with Gravity, and the work anybody else that comes behind us is going to continue to do that pushes us forward in this area.
Definitely, definitely. You know, it's necessary, and even in what you touched on was which was what I was going to say, which is like having that confidence when you're going in these rooms that you have some value in what you're trying to do and just who
Yep,
you are, but also knowing to remember to add value in whatever you're trying to
exactly.
do and whoever you're trying to get at.
Keep up.
Yeah. And so another example of being in the room uh is when I forget what the actual name of the event was, but it was same situation. Clarence was hosting with a bunch of VCs and angels. Remember that
Hmm.
one?
Hmm.
And so I was actually like over north. I was sitting on my computer and I was scrolling, and I was like, and then I saw the event, and I'm like, oh, should I go? And then I'm like, it's all the way in St. Paul, like, and then it started, and like it was already like starting too, so I'm like, So I decided to go. I'm like, I'm taking my own advice. I'm like, all right, you gotta be in the room, just go. So I come out there, end up bumping into a bunch of people I had met or knew, just didn't know they were going there. Um, Talked to a couple of the different investors or whatever, to holler at Clarence. But then as I'm walking out, you tap my shoulder and you're like, yo, this is who you need to talk to. And you were talking to Elizabeth Cotton,
Yeah, yeah,
telling
yeah,
her
yeah.
to holler at me about events.
That was a Techquity event. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, she's like, hey, I'm Liz. I'm from Blacks in Technology and looking for something to do. I'm from out of state. And I actually had the uh Black Vegas event coming up through Premium
Yeah,
that was
it
produced
was
by
that
Winter
Saturday.
Circle. Yeah, and so we exchanged information, and sometimes you meet people and they holler and sometimes they don't. But the next day she actually hit me up and was like, hey, this is Liz. I still want to come to that event, blah, blah, blah. So we connected and told her to come through, and she came through and we had fun. And the event ended at 1 because we were in the W. We are in the suite in
Hmm.
the W. So then ended up taking her to a couple spots around the city that were still open to 2 or 3. So we randomly went to like a Dave Hollister concert. Um, just popped in at the club. He was there performing. So I'm like, cool. Um, had a good time, and then later on we just stayed in touch, and she was like, yeah, we're trying to do this conference called BitCon, but we're like trying to figure out like the logistics and the venue and just how to get more Black people to show up. And then she mentioned, and then so I'm just giving advice and just game. And then she mentions that she wants to get Nipsey Hussle to come speak, but she hadn't been able to get in contact with, any of the agents or managers. And so I helped with that process, and basically just got in where I fit in the first event, just consulting, helping, did a little ticketing for a couple things, helped with setup, takedown, just any moral support that was needed. And then I was asked to help co-produce the second one. So I spent 13 months on the second one. And, that led to a bunch of other things. And that's partially what, opened up kind of a different segment, which leads to what we're doing today with diversity and inclusion. So
Right.
another example of being in the room. If I would have never came, I wouldn't have met her. She doesn't live in Minnesota.
Right.
So
Exactly.
you know what I'm saying? I might have still ended up going to BitCon, but I would have went as just an
That's
attendee, right?
yeah, exactly.
And so
No,
being in
that's
that
major.
room was important. So that was a great introduction. So I appreciate you for that. You know
Yeah.
what I'm
No,
saying?
I remember that day very well, man. Like that was a great event. That event was packed, and it was really just cool to see everybody in the room. And I mean, I feel like my role, I'm a connector, so I want to do my best to try and connect people that need to be connected. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like, and so I was like, yo, I knew all about your app. We had just started, I think we had just started working together at that time. Yeah, we did. We did.
No, we weren't
Was
working
it
together
after?
yet. It was after. We
Okay,
actually just
so
started working together officially last year.
yeah, that's right. 20, so it was 2019 or
Yeah.
was it 2018?
2019,
Man, it
I
felt
became a client.
that's what it was. Okay. Yeah, man. I mean, it's funny because like, but I knew at the end of the day, like, you had what you were doing with premium, and like, I was like, well, if we're gonna do a Black Tech conference in Minnesota, let's use a Black Tech ticketing company.
Yeah.
That's just what how my mind works. It's like, why not do that? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So the least I can do is just say, hey, you need to know about this person, and then go from there. And like everything worked out the way it needed to. And y'all put in a lot of work for VidCon here, and it was a success. And you got Nipsey out here. The last time he was ever in Minnesota was because of y'all. So
Yeah, for sure.
um, that's major, man. And I think I remember that was my first time getting to see him live, just seeing, but I wasn't. It was cool seeing him in live, but not like performing. It was just cool seeing him
Yeah.
be himself, and like to talk about how he kind of grew his business, but understood like how to grow from a scale standpoint, and like then started like making different opportunities for other people around him, and to really help put his community on. Like that was very powerful conversation, and that was a BitCon exclusive. So that was really dope. And I just think that those type of opportunities and events, like a lot of people. It's funny because a lot of people saw that happen. When the pictures came out and the videos came out online, it was like, oh, I didn't even know about this. Like, you know how people are here.
Yeah.
Like, it's like they always complain about not knowing about something, but it's in their face all the time. The people are
Yeah.
just programmed to not show up to things. It's like, show up. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, and just because something doesn't meet your expectations the first time doesn't mean that it's gonna fail the second time. Like, you got to continue to show up and to continue to like, and if you have something to get back, constructive criticism
Right.
is always warranted, not just leaving an angry review on somebody's page just because you can. You know what I'm saying? Like, we
Right.
got to help each other build at the end of the day. And I think a lot of people can learn from that constructive criticism on how to do things better. And it's like, if you have some talents to give, you know, join the team. You know what I'm saying? Help them grow. So that's the way I look at it. Uh,
Definitely.
so
Definitely. And I'll say too that, even in the examples I gave of being hesitant to go to certain events, it was more so it being busy
mhm,
than not being interested. Because obviously I always ended up going because I was interested in going, right?
right.
But like sometimes when you're strapped for time, you're like, I gotta make sure this is like really, something. But you won't know if it's gonna be something unless you go.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can turn something into what you want it to be. But I'll say, being intentional about certain things is the only way Black people are going to be able to come together and use the power of numbers and community to push things forward. And you just mentioned, like, you might go to something and it may not meet your expectations the first time, but that's the first time, right?
Yeah.
Things need a chance to grow. And so and on my last couple podcast episodes, I've talked to people about being intentional, and I've talked to even me being featured on other podcasts, where I'll have white hosts ask me, like, how do we help the Black community, or how do we, if they actually own companies as well, like, what can we do, how can we hire? And I'm like, it has to be intentional. We've
Exactly.
been put in this position intentionally, so we're not going to get out of it by accident.
Exactly. And to that point, it was funny because that makes me think of something when we had our summit for CEI this past week. One of the people that we had as our keynote speakers was Nicole Hannah Jones from the New York Times. She wrote the 1619 Project, and amazing, amazing conversation with our CEO Tawana Black. And one of the things that she said, which was really profound, was a lot of times, you'll see white people they'll ask Black people, how can we fix racism? And her response was, well, Black people didn't create racism, so why do we have to fix it? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, this is something that y'all created. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, all the energy you put in creating it, you can put the same energy into fixing it and solving for it. And but people automatically, whenever it's something, when you're at work, it's like, well, we don't know where to start, or we don't know how to do this or that. It's all of a sudden you don't know how to do something, but like, you get paid to fix or solve problems in every other area, but when it comes to racism, you don't automatically don't know how to solve that problem. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's a very interesting, concept to think about, but it's super real at the same time. And I'm not saying that people right now created it. Like, no, you didn't, but you benefit from the results of it. And the same ways that you benefit, you can understand how that puts people in a position where they're less fortunate, right? Because of how the system is created. So it's just things that people need to think about when it comes to, their position in this social construct that we have, called the social experience of America, right?
Right. I think that so two things. One, um, white people have to feel comfortable being a guest,
Yeah.
right? So I had this conversation on a podcast I was featured on last week, and he was asking. I was telling him how we actually teamed up with St. Cloud University, and we did this was for when we did BitCon
Mhm.
2019,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we had their MBA students do a report on, and a deep dive research analysis on how to get more Black students to BitCon. And one of the things they did a report on was how other ethnicities felt about coming to a conference that had the name Black in it. And so I think white people were like, it doesn't feel like it's for us. Asian, most groups just said, like, it doesn't feel like it's for us if that name's in it. And then their next question was, well, would you still attend? And they broke it down based on pricing. So Asians were going to attend regardless, if it was free. And then white men were willing to pay top dollar to attend, but they didn't feel like it was for them,
Mm.
right? And then Black people were willing to attend up to a certain price point, right? So it's funny because white people were willing to pay more. They were willing to pay top dollar to go, but just didn't necessarily know if they were welcome. Black people, because of economics and stuff, other factors like that, were willing to go, not necessarily pay top dollar to go, right? And so what that tells me when I look at that data is that, um white people have to participate in some of the things that we do, but they have to be comfortable being a guest. A lot of times they want to come and take over.
Mhm.
And so even on the podcast that I was on, he was asking me the same question, where he's like, it was a white guy, and he has a tech company, and he was like, with stuff like BitCon, and because we're putting together our conference for Black Tech Talent next year as well. So with stuff like that, like, are we welcome? Should we be there? Or should we leave that space exclusively for Black people? And I'm like, we would like you to come, and this is how the scenario should go. You have a tech company. We would love for you to come and recruit us.
Exactly.
We would love for you to come and be in the audience and hear our panelists speak, and you learn something about the questions you have from attending,
Exactly.
right? We would love for you to come and find interns, come and find somebody you believe in and mentor them,
Yeah.
right?
Or somebody to invest in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, for you to pay for your tickets and pay for your other employees. So it's like we need and love and welcome that support. But when the times when we have issues is when you try to come hijack, and if you can't hijack, then you don't feel welcome and you don't want to attend, right?
Yeah.
And we get that with different stuff all the times, where it's like, hey, we'll get a white film crew, love what you're doing, blah blah blah, we love to come film, blah blah, and then they send their rates, and it's like, well, I don't want to hire you to film, we have our own film crew, but we'd love for you to come and support it, and then they don't show. So it's like you have to be making money off of it, or have to be a panelist. You have to be somewhere where you're not necessarily just a guest. You have to be of a certain level of importance to participate with us. And that, I think, is one of the best ways I can vocalize the need for us having certain spaces where it is focused on Black, because people all the time will be like, well, how can things be inclusive if Black people are now starting to create their own thing? Shouldn't we all just be together? Or why does everything have to be Black? And it's like, because we need to have a level of importance when we're in certain rooms as well, when we're telling our stories and
Yeah.
pitching our products and having our visions. And they're just cultural nuances that other people aren't going to get, and they don't have to get if we're not of a certain level of importance and influence in the room. But
Yeah.
just like everyone's welcome to their events, everybody's welcome to our events as well. But this is where we're doing our thing, and we're welcoming you to come and learn and participate and invest and be a part of that. And that's how we'll get to a place where things don't necessarily have to be as hardened and defined as that.
Right.
I've even met Black people who are like, oh, they feel like certain things being called and named Black is pandering, or it's a cheat code or stuff like that. And for me, I come from a diverse background. My mom was adopted, so her parents are white, and my grandparents adopted, seven other children. So I have an uncle who's, Black and Native, and an uncle who's Black and white, and I have an aunt who's Black and Native, and I have an aunt who's white, and I have an uncle who's Irish and Japanese, and I come from diversity, literally. That was my upbringing,
Right.
right? My aunts, my uncles, my cousins. Um, but I
Yeah.
didn't grow up with the benefit of white privilege or anything like that. I grew up in the hood, and you know, and and went through a lot on my side of the tracks. But when we all came together, it was one diverse, happy family. So I come from that. And because of that, diversity has been built into every company I made, even with sneakerheads. Um, it was in our mission statement that we were bringing people together through streetwear fashion, right? With Exa Clothing, I made sure I had models of every background in our photo shoots. But Black Tech Talent is the first company that I've literally put Black in the name, because as I'm doing this and we're going through these different things, I'm like, we have to start being specific. Like, we
Yeah.
have to start really, because I'm seeing that whenever the term diversity, BIPOC, all this is created, we're still shoved to the back of that,
Hmm. Yeah.
right?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because, like, one of the things that at CEI, Center for Economic Inclusion, that we focus on is we're not a diversity and inclusion um, organization per se, right? We focus on racial equity and inclusion. And the reason being is because oftentimes with diversity is relative for whoever's talking about it, right? And
Right.
diversity can look like more Black people. Diversity can look like more white women. It can look like more Asian people. It really can be defined how essentially diversity is anything but white men, right? And so when you put that out there and that's the focus, what can happen and what we've seen happen in a lot of companies is, everything is getting diverse, but there's no increase from a racial diversity standpoint. And when you look in Minnesota, we see racial disparities at some of the worst in the country, right? And that comes from wealth, income, it comes from education, it comes from housing, all these very important areas that help advance communities, right? And so if we're continuously focusing on diversity and then you look and it's not defined to solve disparities, right? Then the disparities will continue to happen, but you're achieving diversity goals, right? And so you think you're solving the problem when you're really not. So how can you be solving all these diversity goals that aren't defined and the data is not disaggregated? So you're not really looking at where the true disparities are. And so at CEI, we focus on racial equity and inclusion because we have racial equity disparities in this state and in this region that we need to address. And if
Yeah.
we address those disparities, we can actually move our region forward from an economic standpoint. We can add billions of dollars to the economy if there's more parity between white people and Black people and other people of color as well, right? But because Black people and other people of color in this region aren't having the same opportunities as white people are, they're not able to contribute to the economy. So that's just that's just a lot of stuff left on the table
Yeah.
we're not taking advantage of. And these companies aren't reaching their full potential. They're not reaching all the markets they can reach. They're not reaching all the customers they can reach, and they're not reaching the talent that they can reach. And they recruit talent here, right? And you have them come here, and our CEO says this all the time. So you have the talent come here, and you recruit them because they're different, but then you tell them to be just like you when they get here. And it's like you don't embrace
Mm.
the differences that they bring that should push your organization forward and allow you to be able to reach the other places. You want them to be just like you. So like looking at company culture, looking at exactly all those different areas that make people who are different uncomfortable because they have to conform, is like that's not going to allow you to be able to achieve your racial equity goals as well. So
Exactly.
there's a lot to it that people need to understand. Like we have we have an opportunity, right? Like this year ripped the band-aid off in this region when it comes to racial equity and inclusion from COVID, all the disparities, looking at how it impacted communities of color more than our counterparts, right? And then you look at the racial uprisings with George Floyd and other incidents that have happened with Breonna Taylor and all these other really um, unnecessary and unfortunate circumstances that we continue to find ourselves in as Black people. um, People are tired of it, right? And I think there's a lot of white people who are tired of it too, as far
Yeah.
as seeing it happen. Like we saw that as well. And so we're having, like, I've been able to have some really great conversations with a bunch of people about this, no matter what their background's been, because they're just tired of seeing, and they're finally understanding like how the system has really been structured that perpetuates these things to continue to happen. So it's like, when we do an event that's focused on Black, it's because if we don't, it will not get talked about.
Right.
Period. Right? Like we need to be centered on it, and there needs to be some nuance behind it, right? And not even just nuance, there needs to be some intention behind what. Okay, you're calling your organization Black Tech Talent because if you look at the statistics, Black people make up X amount of percent of the tech industry. When you talk about founders, Black women are still 0.6%. This statistic has been around for 4 years, 4+ years. 0.6% of
Yeah.
Black women are founded, are invested in. when it comes to VC to get money from VCs, right?
Yep.
And then the number has grown a little bit. We start to see more Black women achieve $1 million investments, but it's not where it could or should be. And another crazy statistic is Black women in particular are the fastest growing segment of people starting businesses in the country.
Yeah.
Where you're the least likely to get invested in the tech industry
Yeah.
by a lot. So see how that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Just because they're the fastest growing doesn't mean they're necessarily starting tech businesses, but if they have the ability to grow businesses at a fast rate, imagine what they can do in the tech space, right? And these are women that have the education background, the experience background, but they're because the people that hold the money don't identify with them as a person, they're least likely to get invested in.
Definitely.
And the crazy thing is, how black women know how to stretch money. So you you give them any kind of money, they're gonna be able to make it work. But they need the money that they deserve in order to grow and scale their businesses.
Yeah.
So we have to focus on that too. And it's like that's one of the things that we wanted to highlight when we're doing Gravity. And we're talking about, and I'm talking about that now in my new capacity through CEI. Like, okay, if we can do more of these things, we actually had a great conversation talking about opportunities and assets, Black women in business during our summit for CEI this week. So that'll be recorded on our YouTube page here shortly.
Awesome.
But yeah, just continue to highlight those things are important because we have so much work to do when it comes to bridging these disparities. And it's really about the disparities, man. Like, again, I think diversity and inclusion is great. Everybody should feel included and important and valued at the end of the day. But if we don't focus on racial equity, if we allow just diversity and inclusion to just be the focal point, the race aspect of diversity and inclusion is never going to get talked about.
Right.
It's not. Because the people in
Yeah.
power aren't going to allow it to be talked about unless we continue to push that issue. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. And that's why, I talk about, how important this award has been.
Yeah.
For people who can't see because you're listening, we won the Inclusive Evolution Award from the Minnesota Startup Awards. And if I don't know if you heard my acceptance speech, but I basically said, it's recognition that Black people should be at the helm at diversity and inclusion because, you're seeing, a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, and they're supposedly tackling this issue, and everybody's white. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had somebody reach out to me and say, that's on the board of this organization. I'm not gonna say which one it is, but reached out and said, "Hey, we have a seat open. Like, you should apply." It was, had to do with entrepreneurship stuff like that, and I did apply. I never heard back. I'm not sure, why I didn't hear back, positive or negative, but everybody on that squad except for the person who reached out to me was white. And so they'll be like, okay, we got to do something about diversity, and then they're not even diverse in how they're in the
Yeah.
team that's approaching. You're not bringing on people who are experts in the field
Right.
to handle this either. And so that's why I talk about the award so much. It's not necessarily that um it's an accolade uh that I'm using as a crutch. It's more so I'm showing people like, look, we need more of this. We need more Black founded companies, nonprofit, but especially for profit, because we're for profit, that can make money, that can do good and be experts in this space of helping our people and helping others.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People have a fear, white people have a fear that if Black people are at the forefront of diversity and inclusion, then nobody else will be included. That's, to me, that's what I've seen, and I've even had some of those conversations with them, and a lot of times that's what it is. And so for us to be able to win that says we should be at the forefront, you know what I mean, and we should be fixing this problem, and as you mentioned, racial disparities and you know more about as far as like the percentages when it comes to investments in the startup ecosystem, but in corporate careers, because we're tackling recruiting and stuff like that, um it's 4 to 7% for Black people, it's men and women.
Yeah.
And so now we're looking at it like, okay, there's estimated 900,000 unfilled positions, so current positions that need to be filled. That means at the rate we're currently getting hired at, out of almost 1 million jobs that need to be filled, Black people would only at most get 63,000, right? And so at Black Tech Talent, we're looking to, because we're a startup, we're still building up our capacity to do what we're trying to do, and we'll probably eventually need funding and all these different types of things. And you just mentioned all the barriers that come with that in itself. But over the next 3 to 5 years, we want to get 15,000 people recruited, Black people recruited into these tech positions. And based on the national average salary of about 135,000, if we reach our goal, we're looking at bringing another $2 billion to the Black community annually.
Mm-hmm. No,
Yeah.
and stats like that are important, and that helps put context into how important what you're doing is. You know what I'm saying? And that's how you want to set goals for your company and your organization, and that's how you want to build a business case for why a business should work with you if they want to solve these problems, these social problems that we see. And to kind of touch a little bit about what you were mentioning about diversity inclusion in companies, like one of the things that we talked about this past week was um, in the beginning of the year, diversity and inclusion jobs were actually down 60%, and people and companies were like cutting those positions altogether from the organization. And then COVID hit, and then we saw an increase after George Floyd and everything happened, right? And so
Yeah.
now it's up like 150%, right? And so that, to me, that's like, okay, is that a knee-jerk reaction? That's one of the questions we ask. Is that a knee-jerk reaction, or how do we make sure that these positions are valued and sustainable, right, within these companies? And I think the biggest thing is, in the past, what I would see a lot with a lot of these positions, unfortunately, was you had people that were diversity inclusion managers, officers, whatever it was, but they didn't sit on the senior vice president suite or the executive vice president suite. They were they were just a little bit removed from that. So their level of influence and power didn't spread wide throughout the organization, and that doesn't allow for them to make the impact that's necessary to
Yeah.
change culture and to do change management. So the what we need to start seeing more of is companies really investing in that position and the people in those positions, right? And that's going to look drastically different than how it did before. And we've seen some companies value that, like U.S. Bank. Greg Cunningham sits on their senior vice president team now, right? And that's his focus is diversity inclusion. Um, I got a frat brother down at Mayo Clinic. He's focusing on diversity inclusion, but he's also the head of security for Mayo Clinic. He's the only Black person on their executive team, right? Um, that's major, and we have to see more of that moving forward, because at the end of the day, like, if you talk about issues companies have with hiring talent, right, and then trying to solve, you're talking about one specific segment, right, the tech segment. So like specific roles that go for that, um, but the companies have issues hiring Black people all over the board,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so it's like, but if you don't have, like you said, if you don't have people that are that have experienced the challenges of like working at a place, you know what I'm saying? Understanding like why would you have a hard time hiring people um to come to your company? What is your company like? What does your company value? And what is the experience other people of color have had at your company? Like, do you even know that before you're saying, oh, well, we can't hire anybody? Have you done the work to really find that out? You know what I'm saying? So that's what we help people do at CEI. We help people find out that data and really be able to use that data to make better, sustainable, intentional decisions on
Yeah,
how you address race within your organization.
definitely. And I want to touch on um a few things. One, the reason why we chose tech is number one, we are a business, and so we started, during a pandemic. I came up with the idea, the name, and all that. Registered the domain back in April, and then obviously the pandemic grew to be a bigger thing. And then the George Floyd situation, which, as I told you before, that's somebody who I knew. And
Mm-hmm.
then that situation, carried on, and so, but starting it off as an entrepreneur with the mind frame of what we want to focus on, the tech companies are the only ones who have all the money. So I know there are a lot of tech companies that are like, why are we constantly being reviewed for like our diversity? And it's like, you're the only ones that before you had the most money. Now you're the only ones that have money. If you're looking at, I mean, we're in Minnesota. Minnesota, we've asked the federal government for money like 4 times since all of this has happened, between Minneapolis needing money because of the riots, to all the money that's had to go out for unemployment. And this all happened during tax season.
Yeah,
So
right.
all this tax money was paid out, right? And then the pandemic hits, and then unemployment and small business and all these different types of things. And then you have riots, and then the city's destroyed. And like now, more, and now businesses are closing. And so you got to think about how many businesses and individuals aren't paying taxes, state taxes right now across the country, right? And so that's going to be an issue top of the year when tax season comes again, and they got to pay out people, and when unemployment gets extended for people who still don't have a new job, or people who are currently still losing jobs. I read that somewhere around 19 million Americans could lose their home at the end of this month. Like, it's crazy, it's ridiculous. And so, from a strategic business point of view, I'm like, the tech companies are growing. Everything's gonna this boosted everything digitally to another level. When we look at I can't remember, I think it was it Warner Brothers, Universal, one of the film production companies, like, they did a deal with HBO where everything's releasing on HBO the same time it's releasing in theaters, and they're going
Yep.
to do that all of 2021, right? When this happened, Zoom was like, okay, and now Zoom's like the thing, right?
Mhm.
Zoom's beating out like Microsoft Teams and Google Meets right now for conferencing. That's what we're using right now. And so back in April, even then, that was my thought process. Like, they still have the money. I'm like, they think it's not time for them to hire, but they have all this money that they would spend on marketing that they're not going to be spending, all this money that they would be spending on sponsorship. And so, having that mind frame, I've reached out to a few companies and said, this is what I'm starting. What do you think? Is this something you support? And they said, yeah. And that's what led me to have the confidence to go ahead and move forward and start building out the process. And now we've worked with over 15, different tech enabled corporations to do what we're doing. But I've had conversations even with some of these individuals at these companies that are in these positions, and they ask me like, do you think this is like a fad? Because, as you mentioned, these people get put in these positions, but then they may have limited power, right? And so, my response to that is, I think that because so many people, and you just said, right, it was down 60%, now it's up 150%. So many people have been promoted to these positions that there has to be more consideration, because those people are going to be mad if they don't. People want to feel useful at their jobs.
Yeah,
So if you got all these people that have been promoted
right.
to these positions that are supposed to be important, and then you give them no power, you give them no budget, you don't listen to their influence, they'll become, even if it's for selfish reasons, they'll become advocates for what needs to be done, because now they have these positions. They don't want to lose their
Exactly.
job, right? And that another position may not be available for them of the same pay rate or whatever it may be. And then if it becomes not important all the way around, they can't even take that title to another company because the other company doesn't care, right? So I think I think the hype will die down a little bit, but once again, we chose tech because regardless of that, people still need employees and we have them.
Yep.
So if you're saying, well, hey, we're not racist, but we just, we're over the black thing, well, we still have technologists, professional technologists that are ready and willing to work, and you have open positions. So one way or another, you should work with us, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
so so
Yeah. I
that's one
mean,
of the
at the end of the
things.
day, you're a recruiting platform for them,
Yeah,
and they have an option. They have an option. They can come to you because they specifically need black tech talent, or they come to you because they need talent,
yeah,
right? It's black tech talent. So at the
yeah,
end of the day, it's like you're still getting talent.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
and if it's not a
Exactly.
problem, then work with them.
Exactly. So that's how I think we'll sustain longevity as a company, but just also as a topic. We'll have more allies in these companies because the numbers are so big. And honestly, somebody just told me the other day, that's in one of those positions, like, we've been talking about them working with us, and they were just like frustrated. They're like, I'm really passionate about this, and this is something I'm really trying to get done, and I'm going to try to make sure that they're working with you and other organizations to tackle this. So there are people that are extremely passionate about getting this done and are proud and excited about these positions they've been put in, these titles they've been given. And so what's going to happen is, because we're going to be number one in the space next year, Black Tech Talent. Like we're growing rapidly, and everything's been organic so far. We've been a lean startup, and so now that we're working with more clients, we have more things underway. We're working on our conference. We got our first podcast sponsor, Granicus. So shout out to them. And we have more coming down the pipeline. So, at the end of the day, we'll be number one pretty soon, and then it'll get to a point where companies will have to look at themselves and say, "Well, why haven't you worked with Black Tech Talent? And what
Right.
are you going to say?" And the answer better not be we haven't spoke to them, because that's worse than what I'm saying, trying to come up with a different type of reason. Well, at the time, the budget or whatever it may be, because it doesn't cost anything to talk to us, right? And
Yeah.
so what we're gonna have worked with so many different people that if we haven't worked with you, you're gonna be looked at a little funny from all sides, from the black community, from your diversity and inclusion officers, from your employees, from other corporations who are working with us and you're not. It's going to get tight, and we're going to apply that pressure. And that's one of the reasons why, me having my background and what I come from is going to be a little bit different than other organizations that may be trying to do something similar, whether it's the recruiting, whether it's the content, whether it's the community building, because I'm coming from a different. For one, I'm an entrepreneur, right? So there are different people who have organizations that they're technologists, but they're not entrepreneurs. So they're not necessarily building an organization from a scalable point of view.
Mhm.
Number two, we're for profit. We're not a nonprofit. So this isn't charity. We're doing business. So when you're talking to me, you're talking to a CEO. You're talking to a businessman who
That's
has an agenda.
that's the thing. That's a very important point because I feel like oftentimes the the okay, so the challenge is for a lot of black people who want to solve some of these problems. Um, sometimes, unfortunately, the only way we think we can get money is if we're a nonprofit, because the only way we feel like we get money from these big companies or from white people with money is if they feel like it's charity, which in turn is a tax write-off, which benefits them at the end of the day. And it's like that's not necessarily the only way you can support pushing things forward, right? Like we want to be able to, say, okay, how can you support Black businesses that are also trying to solve problems, right? That you're a prime example of that. Like
Mm,
we got to get out of this charity mindset of the only way to solve Black problems are through charity or racial equity through charity. You can solve it through economics. You can solve it through
yeah.
business B2B strategy and intentional partnerships and things like that. And understand that they're systemically like doing B2B work at a large scale disenfranchises a lot of Black businesses that may not meet that threshold when it comes to a revenue standpoint. Because as you hit a certain revenue, you have to be able to produce at scale to achieve certain goals that a lot of major companies are looking for. So that automatically disqualifies them from contention of doing some of the supply diversity stuff.
Right.
You're right. So it's like we need to like rethink about how we look at doing business with Black businesses and businesses of color who may not have reached that scale yet, but how can these bigger businesses help them grow to get to that capacity? And then you
Mm,
also got to understand too is like the reason why that is another systemic problem. It's like a lot of times you have businesses that can get contracts with these big companies, but they can't reach scale because they don't have the capital. And if they can't get, and the reason why they can't get the capital is because access to capital is a big problem when it comes to Black businesses, because you go to a bank and a bank won't lend you the money, right? Or you're not, or you're as a tech company, you may not have the VCs at your door trying to invest in you, so you don't have the capital. So it's like you have to understand there's like companies have to understand there's reasons, there's levels to why um, sometimes these companies can't reach scale when it comes to doing contracting. So we have to rethink that.
definitely.
So
Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, that's the whole breakdown right there. It's like, you that, and that's why I said a lot of these, because I've been a client at MEDA, because I've gone through Google for Startups, because I've participated in Founder Gym, because I've networked and had a lot of conversations with different people, because I've been building businesses over the years, because I'm a hustler, because I just told a couple stories about how I've been up 2, 3, 4 days and still executed what I needed to execute on all those days before resting, right? Um, I can go in and achieve things differently because I know, number one, I know the games that people will play. I know the expectations that people have. I know how to build a business, and you know I know how to talk to people in a way that they get where I'm trying to go with things. Because if I'm talking to essentially an employee, they got to remember that I'm the CEO,
mm-hmm.
right? But if I'm coming in from a nonprofit point of view, what doesn't matter if I'm the executive director or if I'm the founder of the nonprofit. At the end of the day, I'm asking for a charity. It's a different you get what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
a different conversation because I'm asking you to advocate for me to get this money from your company, whereas I'm coming in and I'm telling you the product we have, the service we have, and how we can fix, be a solution to a problem that you have. But because you're talking to the CEO, and because we're doing actual business, like I just mentioned a couple minutes ago, it could get to a point where you lose your job for not doing business with us, because you're going to be asked, maybe not right away, but eventually when all your competitors are winning for working with us and you're not, and they say, well, didn't you talk to Mike? Didn't you talk to Black Tech Talent? And it's like, oh yeah, well, why didn't we work with them? Oh, well, at the time, like, what are you going to say? Like, right now, as us being new, I'm not hitting people over the head with some of the prices. So a job board posting goes from 150 to 1500. So how is $1 billion corporation going to say, well, we didn't work with them because we didn't want to spend 150 to try it out. We didn't want to spend 1500 to support the cause when it first started. We didn't want to sponsor the Black Tech Talent podcast, which is doing crazy numbers on LinkedIn. Just not including Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and everything else, but on LinkedIn by itself, it's going crazy, right? how are you going to answer that? Right now, like I said, we're new, so you might not feel that pressure, and people are figuring out if they how much they actually care about diversity, how much they want to invest. But by this time next year, when we're number one, and like I said, everything we've done so far is organic. We haven't run any LinkedIn ads, we haven't run any Facebook ads, and we're growing, working with these companies. I have, you know, a ton of meetings set up even this month when companies are usually slowing down. So what happens when we start running ads in January and our podcast goes crazy because we're running ads? What happened? Our community, I grew our community from 0 to 2,000 members in 5 months
Yeah, I mean,
of technologists, though.
right. You've been you've had yourself quite a year, man. Like I've been watching, I've been supporting every way I can. And one thing I always appreciate about you is that anything you do, you're passionate about it and you're intentional about what you do. You don't do anything half-assed. Um, and you put a lot into it. You know what I'm saying? Like hustle and motivate is how you live your life.
Yeah,
so
definitely,
so keep doing what you're doing,
definitely.
man. I think it's definitely important. And it's like, and it's funny because like like we have this conversation all the time. It's like, you never I'm sure 5 years ago you wouldn't have thought that you'd be in the tech space, like for real. Like
Yeah,
I know you were focused on more entertainment side of things, but you were able to blend those two worlds together starting off. And then now, because of the situation, you pivoted fully into tech. and
yeah,
and it's like you can't do entertainment right now. You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
you just can't. So you have to like grow into something different. And I think you're doing a good job in the space, and you're staying true to who you are, and keep doing that. You know what I'm
Thank
saying?
you.
Because I think that's important, and I think there's a place for what you're doing in the space. It's needed. You know what I'm saying? So um, it adds something different and something necessary.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we're gonna, like I said, keep growing and keep focused and getting more people involved and interested. And I have a 20-year plan,
Yeah,
so
that's
we're
good.
gonna we're gonna execute it. We're at the beginning of it, and it's
A
already
lot of
looking
companies don't even know
promising.
what they're going to do in 2 months. So the fact that you have a
Right.
plan is good stuff.
Yeah. You gotta have a vision, man. Gotta have a vision. So we're almost at our time. I just want to let you get off anything else that you want to say, let the listeners know any projects that you're working on, anything people should know about the Center for Economic Inclusion.
Yeah. So coming up on, I think it's January 15th, we're going to be showing the Rise of the Reckoning. It's a documentary that we filmed, highlighting 3 Black businesses that were affected by COVID-19 and the George Floyd uprisings over the summertime. So the businesses that we are featuring are J Clips, the Nail Bar, and Urban Lights. So that's going to be a virtual screening of the documentary and a discussion. And that's on a Friday, so that's going to be during MLK weekend.
Okay.
We'll definitely check that out and support that event. Support those businesses as well too. Um, Urban Lights. Yeah, Tim Wilson is one of my fraternity brothers. He's been doing this thing over in St. Paul for a long time. Um, they were right in front of all the different uprisings that were happening there. Jay Clips also. I used to get my haircut over there when my boy Zach was there. And then Nail Bar, I've worked with Kira when I was at MEDA and helping them grow their business too. So and the Nail Bar and the Beauty Lounge are doing amazing things over on the Uptown side. You got J Clips on the South side, and then you have Urban Lights in St. Paul. So we're hitting all the different areas of the Twin Cities.
Awesome. Awesome. Sounds like an awesome project. I look forward to, continuing to build our relationship and working together. I also look forward to seeing what you guys are doing over there at CEI. Also thank you guys for reaching out and extending opportunities for Black Tech Talent to showcase what we had going on during your summit that you just
Yeah,
had.
we had a virtual marketplace for BIPOC businesses, and Black Tech Talent was one of the featured businesses there. So hopefully we got some exposure for you all. And if you attended the summit, definitely reach out to Mike and connect with him if you're running a company and you're trying to increase some of your diversity on your tech side.
Definitely, definitely.